honestly, folks, my dear friends, this is one of the most important things that you can, that I encourage you to think about as parents. I learned this many years ago in college. It's one of the famous things they teach you in early psychology classes or other things like that, sociology. And basically his theory is that there are 5 sets of human needs, and they're sequential, meaning you can't get to level 2 here. I'm using my cursor here, which is safety, without taking care of the physical needs. And so on and so forth. You can't really love and belong and have intimacy and friendship if you don't have one of those 2. Self-esteem builds on after you have relationships, family, and self-actualization. In Yiddish, we call this to steig, to be all you could be, like the had in the ad of the Marines. I had the great zchus to be married to be in chinuch and Jewish education, lived really for almost 40 years. And I've always thought about this as number 1 when I was trying to find the answer key for one of my students or people in my life, or later on dealing with teens at risk. And the way I think of it from the bottom up. So if a child is acting out, if a child is not actualizing, and they're not studying well, they're fighting around, their self-esteem is low, well, working your way backwards, they're having difficulty in their relationships with their friends, with their family. I always think to myself, 3 square meals a day, is the child being fed well? Are they getting enough sleep? Is everything in order in their physical life? Then how are they feeling safe? And again, we'll discuss details about this before getting to these other things. That's really how I trained myself to think like Maslow, and it hasn't served me wrong over the years. I found that this is really an extraordinary, like any theory, that you can poke holes in it and ask some questions about it. I can tell you a few questions that I have on it, but overall, it's a very wise theory, and I think worthy of thinking about in so many ways as parents. Let's give some practical examples, okay? Just a moment. Okay, so let's take example number 1. I really am using these examples because Maslow's hierarchy of needs is going to be a real underpinning of what we're doing tonight and tomorrow and the next week. So I really want you to understand it well, and I want you to understand, in my opinion, it's something almost that you can't do anything about. It just is, because it's such an important facet of how our minds work and how our lives work. So your car breaks down on the, I'm reading from here on the left side, right? Example 1, your car breaks down on the wrong side of the tracks. Your car breaks down in a bad neighborhood. Yeah, I didn't write this here, but you have 2% on your battery, okay? Let's make the equivalent, in today's vernacular of being really messed up, right? You have 2% on your battery, your car's broken down, you're really afraid for your life. So Maslow would say that you might have your biological and physiological needs. You may have that taken care of. You may have had a good meal. You're physically fine, but you're terrified. Now, your life coach, let's say you've been working with a life coach, and he or she has been talking about setting 5-year goals for yourselves. You say, I'm not achieving everything I want to. You meet with this life coach, and he or she says, you know what, why don't you articulate 5-year goals for yourself? And we'll talk about it later in the week, okay? So now it was later in the week. You get a phone call, and this guy he or she wants to talk to you on the phone. Now just imagine you're on the side of the road, you're feeling really, really unsafe. This guy comes along and wants to talk about 5-year goals. 5-year goals is the 5th level here, self-actualization. You're not feeling safe. I could almost guarantee you that you're going to say something like, or think something like, 5-year goals, I don't know if I'll be alive in 5 minutes. So you really physically, you can't get into a higher order thinking skill. You can't get into this self-actualization, which is beautiful, it's Gan Eden, it's paradise when you get to grow like this, but you can't do it if it's not working right now, okay? So that's example number one, a practical example. You're not feeling safe. You're being schlepped in. Someone's trying to draw you into a level 3 conversation, a level 5 conversation, which is about self-actualizing. It's just not going to happen in all likelihood because your brain is not at ease. Here's a really practical example for parents. And this, you know, again, we're thinking about answer keys. I really encourage you to think about this example, not only in this facet, but in many, you know, many variations of this. Okay, mom says, sweetheart, please do your homework. And your daughter says, no, somebody's bullying me in school. Someone's hurting me on the bus, or someone's nasty to me in the thing. And you say, okay, sweetheart, why don't you do your homework and then we'll talk about it later. Maslow would say, again, there's a safety deficit. It's just, she might do it because she might not want to be punished, or she might want to, but you can bet your bottom dollar that she's not going to really be concentrating well. Okay, and you know, you could think about this thing with the car breaking down on the wrong side of the tracks. There's so many applications of this. Think of if you live in the New York area, how do you feel after Hurricane Sandy, not having power for 5 days or 10 days? I remember myself, it was actually rather amusing. I happened to have been fortunate enough to get a generator before Sandy hit. And we actually had power at home. We lost all our power here in Muncie, everybody did. And I was sitting there, I remember saying to myself, I was still in Yeshiva at the time, school was closed. I said, you know, this is Gan Eden, I can do all the writing projects that I wanted to. It's quiet, I have nowhere to go, there's no place to go, I can't go anywhere if I want to, there's no work, there's no nothing. And I found that I just didn't have the menucha, even though I had a generator working outside. And then, because I wasn't really settled, and then there was a gas shortage, day 3 or 4, and that was just gone. Even though I had 2 full canisters of gas there, I kept hearing the generator ticking out there, thinking to myself, okay, soon I'm not going to have power either. So this is really powerful stuff. So if your children have issues that they can't deal with, just understand that this is very real. Another application, I just thought of this in Yiddish, a farher means an examination. So I would do an oral examinations of my students. I would go into class and ask them questions about Chumash, about Gemara, you know, whatever they were learning at any given time. And I realized I had an issue with one of my students that related to Maslow, and I don't know, I was thinking about it as I was walking in to test for her class, to test one of the classes. And typically I would go around the room and ask random questions. And I remember saying to myself when I walked into the room, I said, Yankee, practice what you preach. If you're calling on kids, maybe the kids are not comfortable. Maybe they don't know all of the Gemara. And maybe when you call on them, you're creating anxiety. So I wrote here, what are they thinking about? So I'm trying to engage them, again, going back to Maslow here, I'm trying to engage them in self-actualization, in steiging and growing and all of that stuff. And they might really be nervous about being called on. And that I'm getting into a Tosfos, you know, commentaries on the Talmud, on the Gemara, and the kids are thinking, okay, is he going up the rows or down the rows? Is he going by the alphabet, ABC? Is there some random system that he has? I haven't been called on in the last 2 fahers. Is it my turn now? So I walked into class. I said, all right, guys, you know what? We're going to start a new thing right now. Anybody could say pass. All you have to do is say pass. I won't hold it against you. I'll just assume that you didn't, you know, whatever you wanted to say, a different piece of Gemara. And I noticed that the whole class relaxed. And I got better quality answers and learning out of the kids. Okay, one final one, just a Torah source. I found this is my own thought. Feel free to disagree. This is only Yankee. There's a fascinating exchange in Parshas Va'era when Moshe Rabbeinu comes to take the Bnei Israel out of Egypt, and Hashem tells him, speak to the Jewish people, and they're going to listen to you. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu talks to them, and I'll give you the text in a minute. He says basically, I'm going to take you out of the land of Egypt where they were being oppressed. It so happens that these are the four kossos, the four glasses of wine that we drink on Pesach, are the we have Hatzeisi, Vitalti, Vigalti, Lakachti. I'll take you out, I'll redeem you, I'll free you, and I'll bring you to Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. And it says, here's the text: Vaydav Moshe came to Bnei Israel. This is what Moshe said. V'lo shamu Moshe, the Jews didn't listen to Moshe. Mikotza ruach, they had short of breath. And they avoid kasha from hard work. So they didn't listen to Moshe. Moshe said, I'm going to take you out of here. And they said, they couldn't hear what he was saying. Why? Because they were oppressed. Now, one of the famous jails in New York area is called Rikers Island. Okay, it's a pretty rough place there. Now, just get this in your mind now. Imagine a delivery truck pulls up, and the guy whispers to he sees two inmates there, and he says, "Hey, guys, come on over here. Jump in the back of the truck. No one checks me on the way out." And okay, so they have a 25-year sentence. They have an opportunity for freedom, and they suddenly say, "Oh, one second, just a minute now. The warden is making me crazy. You know, these guards are bothering me. Forget it, I can't come." Right? That would be a reason to jump on the truck. So they didn't listen to Moshe Rabbeinu because they were short of breath. They couldn't relax. So that should have been a reason that they should listen. So I want to suggest as follows. Listen to Moshe speaking and think of Maslow. Okay? Moshe Rabbeinu says like this. I'm going to redeem you from Mitzrayim. That's number 1 or 2, right? I'll get you freedom and you'll be safe. V'tzalti eschem, I'll save you from the hard work. I'll redeem you. V'ga'alti eschem. Now, then he starts. I would like to suggest Moshe Rabbeinu jumps to 5, and he starts talking to them. I'll bring you. You'll become my nation, and Hashem will be your God, and I'll bring you to the land of Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel. I believe that that's when he lost them. The first 3 they were fine with, but that's my own interpretation. That they lost them because it was just too much. Okay, so again, I'm sorry I spent this much time with different examples, although some of you wanted it in the survey. But it's so important that you understand that it's almost like a rule of nature that gravity brings things, down towards the earth. It just doesn't work. And the more you can think about looking at something and thinking what's going on here, the better you'll be able to help your kids. I happen to have realized this in my eureka moment was when I realized about 18 years ago that so many children were being abused because, and this is something for parents to think about, not chas v'shalom only about abuse, but children being in a bad spot. I had a group of people that I was dealing with and trying to figure out why the kids were self-destructing. And it seemed, according to Maslow, I knew some of these families, everything seemed right. And they were still self-destructing. And I remember thinking to myself, what would Maslow say? This doesn't make sense. It's like they got destroyed from within. And I said, oh my goodness, they were molested. And I called the parents and they all said, nothing, it's not true. And then they checked and every one of those kids had been abused. That's when I started writing about it. So going back to the situation where we had this scenario number 1, I found over the years that when you see a rapid decline, you see, if you notice that, remember last week I was saying, listen carefully, that Hasidic parent who spoke to me about their kid was in the room and what wasn't coming out for anything. And I said, listen carefully, what exactly did he say? He said that it's all words to me. And they're learning the same thing again and again. This is a big deal. When you see children, a rapid decline, it's very, very likely trauma related. So my advice to parents, if it's a child of yours, if it's something that doesn't seem to make sense and you see a tremendous decline, like almost overnight or over the period of a few weeks, I would encourage you. It doesn't necessarily mean child abuse. It doesn't necessarily mean sexual abuse, but it usually is a trauma related because it's so much harder for them to concentrate on where we are. And here's one of my main points tonight, is I encourage you to think of your role as parents to provide those 2 levels. So because we want our children to have family connection with us, and eventually, God willing, intimacy, where they get into a loving relationship with their spouse, and they have family connections and friendships, because we want them to have that, and because we want them to going up the ladder, right, to have respect, status, recognition, self-esteem, to feel good about themselves, and to be all they could be. That's not the only reason you should do it, but I really encourage you to think as parents, not only providing for the physiological needs, but providing them with a sense of safety. And I encourage you to think about that as one of your primary roles. And one